How could a single whisper at my wife's memorial expose the one betrayal I never expected? I had just flown back from another continent, still in uniform, when I realized the truth wasn't distant or abstract. It was sitting a few rows ahead of me, and it carried my last name. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The notification came through encrypted channels while I was reviewing supply requisitions at the forward base. Elena had passed. Memorial service scheduled in 4 days. My commanding officer approved emergency leave without asking questions. He knew my record. 27 years of service doesn't require explanation. I packed a single duffel bag. The logistics officer processed my departure authorization while I stood in the afternoon heat outside the operations tent. Sand clung to my boots. The air smelled like diesel and dust. I'd been in that place for 11 months. The war wasn't over, but my part in it had just been suspended. The transport flight took 18 hours with 2 layovers. I sat in a middle seat surrounded by equipment crates and junior officers rotating home for leave. Nobody spoke to me. I kept my phone off for most of the flight. When I finally powered it on during the second layover, I expected messages. Coordination details, questions about arrival time, something from Lucas. Nothing. I checked twice. The screen showed only automated notifications from the airline and a brief email from the memorial director confirming the service location and time. My son hadn't sent a single word. The plane touched down at 7 in the morning. I cleared customs with my military ID and walked into the arrival hall carrying my duffel. Families waited behind barriers, holding signs and flowers. Children ran toward returning parents. I scanned the crowd once, then headed toward ground transportation. Nobody was waiting. I rented a sedan and drove toward the city in silence. The highway stretched flat and gray under a colorless sky. Traffic moved steadily. I kept the radio off. My uniform felt heavy. I'd worn it because changing seemed pointless. It was what I had. The GPS guided me toward the church. I'd attended services there with Elena maybe twice a year when I was home. She went regularly. She knew the priest. She knew the community. I was the man in uniform who appeared occasionally and nodded politely during coffee hour. I arrived 90 minutes before the service. The parking lot was nearly empty. I left my bag in the trunk and walked toward the side entrance. The building was old stone with narrow windows. Ivy climbed the walls. The air smelled like cut grass and damp earth. A woman in a dark suit stood near the door with a clipboard. She glanced at my uniform and then at my face. "Are you family?" she asked. "Husband," I said. Her expression shifted. "Oh, Mr. Fallon, I'm so sorry for your loss. Lucas didn't mention you'd arrived." "I just got here." She checked her clipboard. "You're seated in the front row. The service begins at 11. I nodded and walked past her into the courtyard. A few people stood in small clusters near the chapel entrance. I didn't recognize most of them. Elena had built a life here while I was overseas. She had friends, routines, connections I'd never been part of. Lucas stood near the far wall talking to 3 younger people. He wore a dark suit. His hair was shorter than I remembered. He looked composed, calm. He was nodding at something one of them said. I walked closer. He didn't notice me until I was 10 feet away. When he finally looked up, his expression didn't change. No relief, no acknowledgement, just a brief flicker of something I couldn't identify. "Dad," he said. His voice was flat. "Lucas." He stepped forward and extended his hand. Not a hug, a handshake. I took it. His grip was firm but brief. "Good flight?" he asked. "Long." "Yeah." He glanced back at the people he'd been talking to. They were watching us. One of them smiled awkwardly. Lucas didn't introduce them. "Service starts soon," he said. "You should probably get inside." "I will." He nodded once and turned back to his group. The conversation resumed. I stood there for another moment, then walked toward the chapel entrance alone. The church interior was dim and cool. Wooden pews stretched toward a simple altar. Flowers covered every available surface. White lilies, roses, arrangements I didn't recognize. A large photograph of Elena stood on an easel near the front. She was smiling in the picture. It must have been taken a few years ago. Her hair was lighter than I remembered. I took my seat in the front row. The pew was empty except for me. Lucas would sit here eventually, but for now I was alone. People filed in slowly. The rustling of fabric. Quiet voices. Someone coughed. I kept my eyes forward. The priest entered from a side door. Father Benedict Hale. I'd met him twice. He was older now. Gray hair, thin frame. He wore simple vestments and carried a prayer book. He glanced toward me briefly, then took his place at the lectern. Lucas slid into the pew beside me just as the service began. He didn't look at me. He folded his hands in his lap and stared at the altar. Father Hale spoke about Elena with quiet respect. He mentioned her volunteer work, her dedication to the community, her kindness. He didn't mention me. He didn't mention military service or long deployments or the years she spent alone. The eulogy focused on the life she'd built here, in this place, without me. I listened without reacting. My hands rested on my knees. My breathing was steady. I'd learned a long time ago how to sit still. Several people stood to share memories. A woman from the volunteer group, a neighbor, someone from the library board. They spoke about Elena's warmth, her humor, the way she remembered everyone's name. Lucas didn't stand. Neither did I. The service ended with a hymn I didn't know. People sang quietly. I stood, but didn't sing. When it was over, Father Hale offered a final blessing and stepped down from the lectern. Lucas stood immediately. "I need to talk to some people," he said. He walked toward the back of the church without waiting for a response. I remained seated while the pews emptied. People passed me with murmured condolences. "So sorry for your loss. She was a wonderful woman. You must be very proud." I nodded to each of them. I didn't know their names. The church grew quiet. I was about to stand when Father Hale appeared at the end of the pew. "Mr. Fallon," he said. His voice was low. "May I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course." He gestured toward the side corridor. "In private, if you don't mind." I followed him past the altar and through a narrow doorway. The corridor was lined with old wooden panels and faded photographs of previous clergy. He led me to a small room with a single window, a desk, 2 chairs. He closed the door gently behind us. "Please sit," he said. I sat. He remained standing for a moment, then lowered himself into the chair across from me. He folded his hands and looked at me directly. "I'm not certain how to begin this conversation," he said, "but I believe you deserve to know something." I waited. "Elena came to see me the week before she passed," he continued. "She was troubled. She asked if we could speak in confidence, and I agreed." He paused. I didn't fill the silence. "She told me she had discovered something," he said. "Something that weighed on her conscience. It involved your son." My hands remained still. My breathing didn't change. "She didn't provide all the details," Father Hale said, "but she indicated there had been decisions made without your knowledge, actions taken while you were deployed. She felt responsible for not noticing sooner." "What kind of actions?" I asked. "Financial matters," he said carefully. "Legal authority. She mentioned documents she'd found, signatures that shouldn't have existed." "Did she confront him?" "She intended to," Father Hale said, "but her condition worsened before she could arrange the conversation properly. She passed 3 days later." He leaned back slightly. "I'm telling you this because she asked me to ensure you were informed if something happened to her. She didn't want you to return home unaware." I absorbed the information without reacting. "Why not tell me immediately?" "Because I had to honor the timing she requested," he said. "She wanted you to attend the memorial first, to see how things stood. She believed you'd understand the situation better with that context." I nodded slowly. "Is there anything else?" "Only this," Father Hale said. "She loved you very much. She was proud of your service, and she was deeply sorry she hadn't been more vigilant." He stood. I stood as well. "Thank you," I said. He opened the door. "I've fulfilled my obligation to her," he said. "What you do with this information is your decision." I walked back through the corridor into the main church. It was empty now. Sunlight filtered through the narrow windows, casting long shadows across the pews. I stood there for a moment, looking at the empty seat where Lucas had been sitting. Then I turned and walked out. The old family house sat on a quiet, oak-lined street. Elena and I had bought it 15 years ago, planning to retire here. She'd lived alone in it for most of the last decade. I parked in the driveway. The lawn was trimmed, the flower beds tended. Someone had been caring for the place. The key still fit. It turned easily. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old wood. The furniture was familiar: couch, coffee table, bookshelves. But small things were off. A missing lamp, a new entry rug, photos rearranged on the mantel. I set my duffel down and moved slowly through the rooms. The kitchen was spotless, the fridge nearly empty, condiments, half a loaf of bread, nothing fresh, recently cleared. Elena's placemat still sat at the table, faded blue with white trim. We'd bought it at a craft fair years ago. She used it every day. Now it waited for no one. Above the sink, her mug collection stood untouched. Souvenirs from the few trips we'd taken together. Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, a cafe in Charleston, neatly arranged, unused. Upstairs, the bedroom looked unchanged. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. A mystery novel open beside them, 3/4 finished. She'd never reached the end. Her closet was orderly as always. Dresses, blouses, casual wear, sorted by color and season. Elena believed in order. On the dresser sat family photos. Our wedding. Lucas as a child. The 3 of us years ago. We looked happy. Maybe we were. Or maybe I'd just been gone too often to notice when that changed. Lucas's old room stopped me cold. Not clean, empty, no bed, no desk, no shelves. Only curtain marks and pale rectangles on the walls. The dust patterns were recent. The closet was bare. Even the hangers were gone. I stood there, trying to piece together when it had happened, and whether Elena had known. In the bathroom, her toothbrush still stood in its holder. Prescription bottles lined the shelf. One was pain medication, dated 2 weeks before she passed. Nearly full. She'd either not needed it or refused it. That would have been like her. I went to the garage. The light flickered on. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in Elena's careful handwriting. Decorations, tax records, photo albums, tools. The same precise script she'd used in letters during my deployments. She'd always written faithfully. I hadn't always replied. One stack in the corner had no labels. I opened the top box. Inside were folders, medical records, insurance papers, financial statements from the past 2 years. I carried the box to the workbench and began sorting through the contents. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals, large sums, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, authorization forms with signatures I needed to examine more closely. The first statement showed a withdrawal of $15,000. Date, March 15th, 18 months ago. Authorization signature, mine. Except I'd been overseas that entire month. No leave, no exceptions. I pulled out my phone and checked my deployment records. March 15th, I'd been at the forward operating base conducting logistics reviews. I pulled out my phone and took photographs of each document. Then I opened the next box. More files, legal paperwork, power of attorney documents dated 18 months ago. My name appeared on several forms, but the signatures didn't look quite right. I compared them to my actual signature on my military ID. Close, very close, but not exact. The F in Fallon curved differently. The K in Drik had an extra loop. Small details, and details a bank teller wouldn't notice. Details I noticed immediately. The third box contained more recent documents, statements from the past 6 months. The withdrawals had increased in frequency and size. 20,000 in April, and 30,000 in June, another 25,000 in August, just weeks before Elena passed. At the bottom of that box, I found something else. A manila folder with Elena's handwriting on the tab. Questions need answers. I opened it carefully. Inside were pages of notes. Dates circled. Question marks next to transactions. Phone numbers for banks. A list of documents with check marks next to some and question marks next to others. One page had a simple timeline written in her hand. January, first suspicious withdrawal, called bank. They confirmed signature on file, but Drik was overseas. February, another withdrawal, checked deployment calendar. Drik had no leave. March, found power of attorney document. Signature looks wrong, need to investigate. April, confronted Lucas about helping with bills. He seemed evasive, didn't show me any paperwork. May, bank called about large transfer request. I didn't authorize it. They said they had signed documents. June, found more documents in Lucas's old room. Drik's signature on all of them. But the dates are wrong, all wrong. The entries stopped there. The next page was blank, except for a single line at the top. I need to tell Drik, but I need to be certain first. I need all the proof. I spent 2 hours in the garage. By the end, I had 3 boxes of documents cataloged and photographed. The pattern was clear. Money had moved. Authority had been transferred. Decisions had been made in my name while I was 7,000 miles away. Each withdrawal corresponded to a date when I was verifiably overseas. Each signature was close but imperfect. Each authorization impossible for me to have provided in person. I found one more item at the bottom of the last box. A sealed envelope with my name on it in Elena's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her handwriting, shakier than usual, dated 1 week before she passed. Drik, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found what I found. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't call you immediately. I'm sorry I didn't stop this sooner. I thought I needed more proof. I thought I needed to be absolutely certain before accusing our son of something so terrible. Now I was certain. The evidence was clear, and time was no longer on my side. She'd asked Father Hale to speak to me after the memorial. She wanted me to see Lucas first, to understand the position he'd built while I was gone. She didn't know what I'd choose to do, but she trusted me to do what was right. She always had. She loved me. She was proud of the man I was and the service I'd given, and she left the decision to me. Elena. I read the letter 3 times, folded it carefully, and placed it back in the envelope. Around me, boxes of evidence lined the workbench. She'd known for months, discovered the betrayal alone, documented everything as her health failed while her son kept stealing from us both, and she'd trusted me to decide what came next. I returned the boxes to the shelf and shut off the light. In the kitchen, I opened my phone and found Colonel Aaron Whitmore, retired, now military legal advisory. We'd served together. He understood procedure. Need to consult. Time sensitive. We'll call tomorrow. His reply came within a minute. Available 0900. Clearing schedule. I set the phone down and looked around the empty kitchen. Elena had lived here. Coffee, plans, mornings. And somewhere in this room she'd realized the truth. The house was silent. Only the clock marked time she no longer had. I didn't feel anger. Anger required heat. What I felt was colder, familiar. The clarity of mission planning. Define the objective, assess resources, execute precisely. Upstairs, I unpacked, showered, and lay down. Elena's pillow still held its shape. I left it untouched. Sleep came easily. I'd trained for that. Tomorrow, I would begin the correction. Tonight, I rested in the house where my wife uncovered the truth and prepared it carefully, knowing I would find it and knowing I would know what to do. She was right to trust me. I called Colonel Whitmore at exactly 0900. He answered on the second ring. "Drik," he said. "Good to hear from you. I was sorry to learn about Elena." "Thank you. You're back stateside?" "Arrived yesterday. I need advice on a procedural matter." "Go ahead." I outlined what Father Hale had told me. Then I described what I'd found in the garage. Whitmore listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. "You have documentation?" he asked. "Photographs, statements, legal forms, all dated and organized. Send them to my secure email. I'll review this morning." "Understood." "Drik," he said, "if this is what it appears to be, there are institutional mechanisms. We don't need to approach this emotionally." "I'm not approaching it emotionally." "Good. I'll call you back in 3 hours." He disconnected. I spent the next hour uploading files to his secure server. Each document was labeled by date and category: bank records, power of attorney forms, property transfer documents, withdrawal authorizations. The pattern wasn't subtle once you knew what to look for. I made coffee while the files uploaded. Elena's coffee maker, the one she'd used every morning. I found her favorite mug in the cabinet, a simple white ceramic piece with a small chip on the rim. I filled it and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the documents spread before me. The timestamps on the bank statements told their own story. Withdrawals processed at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I checked my deployment records on my phone. That same Tuesday, I'd been in a convoy briefing 7,000 miles away. The signature on the authorization form was close to mine, close enough to fool a bank teller who'd never met me, but not close enough to fool someone who'd signed their own name 10,000 times across military documents. I took photographs of the comparison, my actual signature from my military ID next to the forged version from the bank documents. The differences were subtle but clear: the way the F in Fallon curved, the spacing between letters, small details that would matter in court. At noon, Whitmore called back. "I've reviewed everything," he said. "This is actionable. Multiple violations of fiduciary responsibility, forged authorization signatures, unauthorized access to joint accounts. If you want to pursue this, I can connect you with the right people." "I want to pursue it. Then we need to move carefully," he said. "No confrontation, no public accusations. We document everything, coordinate with legal and financial institutions, and execute when all procedures are aligned. Timeline? 72 hours. Maybe less if we're efficient. What do you need from me? Stay quiet. Don't contact Lucas. Don't discuss this with anyone outside our chain. I'll coordinate with Marlowe Ellery. You remember him? Logistics officer. Retired same time as you. Correct. He's now working in private financial investigations. Between the two of us, we can verify every transaction and lock down the institutional response before anyone knows we're moving." Understood. "One more thing," Whitmore said. "You need to be certain about this. Once we initiate, there's no walking it back." "I'm certain." Then I'll be in touch by end of day. I spent the afternoon walking through the neighborhood. The streets were quiet. Children played in distant yards. A dog barked somewhere. I passed the park where Elena used to walk. The benches were empty. The playground equipment looked newer than I remembered. An older woman was walking her dog along the path. She looked up as I approached. "Excuse me," she said. "You're Elena's husband, aren't you?" I stopped. "Yes." "I'm so sorry for your loss. She was a lovely woman. Always stopped to chat when I was out with Murphy here." She gestured to the small terrier at her feet. "Thank you." "You're in the military?" "Yes, ma'am." She was very proud of you. She talked about your service often. The woman hesitated. "Your son has been very helpful since she passed. Taking care of things, he's been a comfort to the neighborhood." I nodded but didn't respond. The woman seemed to sense something in my silence. "Well, I won't keep you," she said. "Again, I'm so sorry." She walked away with her dog. I continued along the path, thinking about what she'd said. Lucas had positioned himself well, the devoted son, the helpful neighbor, the man managing everything while his father was far away. I returned to the house and checked my phone. An email from Whitmore with a secure link. I opened it and found a detailed breakdown of what would happen over the next 3 days. Contact timeline, institution coordination, legal filing procedures, everything mapped out with military precision. At the bottom, a note. "Marlowe will call you tomorrow morning. He'll need deployment verification and timeline documentation. Have your service records ready." I spent the evening gathering everything Marlowe would need. I pulled up my official deployment records on the military database. Every location, every date, every assignment. I created a spreadsheet cross-referencing my confirmed positions with the dates on the fraudulent documents. The pattern was damning. March 15th, fraudulent signature in California. My confirmed location, forward operating base in the Middle East. June 22nd, another signature. My location, coordination meeting at Coalition headquarters. September 8th, property transfer document. My location, supply route inspection, documented with GPS coordinates. Impossible. All of it impossible. I printed everything and organized it in a folder. Then I sat back and looked at the work. This was what Elena had been doing in her final weeks, gathering proof, building a case, making sure I'd have everything I needed. She'd known I'd approach this systematically. No emotion, no confrontation, just evidence and procedure and institutional mechanisms. She'd trusted me to do exactly what I was doing now. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Fallon?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Jennifer Mills from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding some irregularities we've noticed on your account." "What kind of irregularities?" "We've received notification from Military Legal Advisory that there may be unauthorized access to your accounts. I wanted to verify your current status and confirm some recent transactions." "I'm available to discuss this. What do you need?" She walked me through a series of verification questions. Date of birth, social security number, mother's maiden name. Then she pulled up the account history. "I'm showing significant withdrawals over the past 18 months, she said. "Were you aware of these transactions?" "I was not. I've been deployed overseas during that entire period." "I see." Her voice became more formal. "Mr. Fallon, I need to inform you that we've initiated a fraud investigation. Your accounts have been temporarily frozen pending review. You'll need to come in person to complete the necessary paperwork." "When?" "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if you're available." "I'll be there at 9. "I'll have everything prepared. And Mr. Fallon, I'm very sorry this happened. We take these matters extremely seriously." After she disconnected, I sat holding the phone. The institutional mechanisms were already engaging. Whitmore had said 72 hours. It was happening faster than that. That evening, Whitmore sent a detailed email. He'd already contacted 3 institutions. Account freezes would be in place by morning. Legal review was underway. Marlowe Ellery had confirmed timeline discrepancies that made certain signatures impossible. Everything was moving forward. The email included a section on what to expect. Financial institutions will conduct their own investigations. Law enforcement may become involved depending on the amounts and jurisdictions. Your son will likely be contacted by his bank first, then by attorneys. He'll realize something is happening, but by the time he understands the scope, all the procedural wheels will already be turning. I read the email twice, then deleted it as instructed. The plan was clear. Now it was just a matter of execution. I made dinner mechanically. Pasta with olive oil and garlic. Simple food Elena used to make when I was home. I ate alone at the kitchen table, the empty chair across from me a reminder of everything that had changed. After dinner, I walked through the house one more time. Each room held memories: the living room where we'd watched movies together during my brief leaves, the bedroom where we'd talked late into the night about future plans, the study where Elena had managed household finances while I was deployed. In the study, I found more of her notes. A calendar with dates circled, question marks next to certain entries. She'd been tracking the irregularities for months before she'd gathered enough evidence to be certain. One note, written in her careful handwriting, stood out. Called the bank today. They confirmed a withdrawal on March 15th. But Drik was overseas. I checked his deployment orders. He couldn't have been here. Who signed for this? Another note, dated 2 weeks later. Lucas came by, asked if I needed help with any paperwork, seemed nervous. I didn't mention what I'd found. Not yet. I need to be absolutely sure before I accuse him of something this serious. I closed the notebook and returned it to the drawer. Elena had carried this burden alone. She'd discovered her son's betrayal and had no one to share it with. No one to help her process the reality that the child she'd raised had become someone capable of systematic theft. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dad, can we talk?" Lucas. He must have gotten a new phone or was using someone else's. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whitmore had been clear. No contact, no conversations that could complicate the legal proceedings. Another message arrived 5 minutes later. "I know you're back. We need to discuss some things about Mom's estate." I powered off the phone. The house fell silent around me. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening routines. Lights came on in windows, cars pulled into driveways. Normal family life continuing while I sat in the dark, preparing to dismantle my son's carefully constructed facade. Sleep came late that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about timelines and evidence and institutional procedures. This was familiar territory: planning, preparation, execution. I'd spent 27 years in the military learning how to operate in exactly this way. But this wasn't a supply route or a security protocol. This was family. This was the son I'd raised. The boy who'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, the teenager who'd graduated high school while I was deployed, the young man who'd somehow decided that distance meant opportunity. I pushed the thoughts away and focused on the facts, the evidence, the documentation. Tomorrow morning, I'd meet with the bank. Marlowe would call. The procedures would continue advancing. Everything else was just noise. The next morning, Marlowe Ellery called at exactly 0800. "Drik," he said, "Aaron briefed me. I've been through the financial records. This is textbook unauthorized access. Your son had no legal authority for any of these transactions." "Can you verify the timeline?" "Already done. Half these signatures were dated while you were confirmed overseas. No leave, no stateside presence. Impossible for you to have authorized them in person." "What's the total?" "Liquid assets? Just over $240,000. Property transfer documents suggest he was positioning to claim the house as well." I didn't respond immediately. The number settled into my mind like a stone dropping into still water. $240,000. Elena's inheritance from her parents, our retirement savings, the emergency fund we'd built over 27 years of careful planning. "There's more," Marlowe continued. "He opened credit lines in your name, applied for loans using forged documentation. Most were denied, but 3 went through. Total exposure is closer to $300,000 when you factor in the debt." I stood at the kitchen window, watching morning light filter through the oak trees. How far back does this go? First transaction I found is dated 22 months ago. Small withdrawal. $5,000. Then it escalated. By month 6, he was moving money weekly. Did Elena catch all of it? Based on her notes? Probably not. She found the major transfers. But some of the smaller movements were hidden in routine expenses. He was careful until he got greedy. I turned away from the window. "What do we need to proceed?" "I need you to provide a formal statement to Aaron. Timeline of your deployments, confirmation of your locations during key transaction dates. Your commanding officers can verify you were nowhere near the financial institutions when these documents were supposedly signed." "I can get that today." "Good. There's also the question of how he obtained your personal information, social security number, account passwords. Elena's notes suggest he had access to files in the house." "He lived here before joining me overseas for a brief period," I said. 2 years ago. He had time to go through everything." Marlowe was quiet for a moment. "That's calculated, Drik. This wasn't impulse. He planned it." "I know." "There's a community gathering scheduled for tomorrow evening," Marlowe said, shifting topics. "Post-memorial reception at the church hall. I assume you were invited? I received a notice. Good. That's your stage. Everyone relevant will be present. Lucas, the financial advisors who process these transactions. Several witnesses who can verify your presence and timeline. You're suggesting I address this publicly? I'm suggesting you finalize it publicly, Marlowe said. Aaron and I will have all institutional decisions executed by tomorrow afternoon. Accounts frozen, transfers reversed, legal notifications filed. By the time you walk into that hall, the outcome is already determined. You're just informing them. And Lucas? He'll realize too late that the situation isn't negotiable. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down. The chairs were the same ones Elena and I had purchased 15 years ago. She'd sat in this exact spot thousands of times. She'd discovered the truth sitting here, probably, going through papers, finding discrepancies, realizing what her son had done. Who else needs to be coordinated? I asked. The church administrator, the financial institution representatives, and one witness from the legal office, someone who can confirm procedural compliance if anyone questions the timing. Can you arrange that? Already in motion. Aaron's handling institutional coordination. I'm managing documentation and witness verification. You just need to show up and deliver the information clearly. I can do that. Drik, Marlowe said carefully, I know this isn't easy. Elena trusted you to handle this correctly. She could have handled it herself before she passed. She could have confronted him directly. But she chose to wait. She chose to let you decide how to respond. Why would she do that? Because she knew you'd do it right. Without emotion, without vindictiveness, just correction. That's who you are. I didn't know how to respond to that. Marlowe continued. We'll have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon. I'll send you a detailed briefing tonight. Review it, memorize the key points. But don't overthink the delivery. Just state the facts. The room will do the rest. We finalized details for another 20 minutes. Timeline confirmations, document references, the order in which information should be presented. By the time the call ended, I had a clear mental map of how tomorrow evening would unfold. I spent the rest of the day gathering the documentation Marlowe had requested. I contacted my previous commanding officers through secure channels. They responded within hours, service records, deployment confirmations, GPS-verified location data for key dates. Everything was documented with military precision. Major General Patricia Reeves, my commanding officer from 2 years ago, sent a particularly detailed response. Colonel Fallon's service record during the period in question is exemplary and thoroughly documented. He was under my direct command from January through November of that year. He had 0 stateside leave, 0 exceptions. His presence at our forward operating base is verified through daily briefings, security checkpoints, and mission logs. If you need sworn testimony, I'm prepared to provide it. I forwarded her message to Marlowe, along with the supporting documentation. By late afternoon, I'd compiled a complete timeline, every transaction Lucas had executed, cross-referenced with my confirmed location overseas. The pattern was undeniable. While I was coordinating supply routes through hostile territory, my son was systematically draining our family accounts. I created a visual representation, a dual timeline, left column, Lucas's fraudulent transactions. Right column, my verified military presence 7,000 miles away. The impossibility was stark, undeniable. I sent the compiled file to Marlowe and Whitmore. Then I sat in the garage where I'd first discovered the evidence. The boxes were still stacked against the wall. Elena's handwriting on the labels, her careful organization. She'd been trying to understand what was happening and trying to make sense of her son's betrayal. I pulled down one more box I hadn't examined before. Inside were older documents, Lucas's school records, report cards, letters he'd written home when I was deployed. I picked up one from his high school years. Dad, everything's good here. Mom's doing great. I'm helping her with stuff around the house. Our grades are solid. Hope you're staying safe over there. Love you. Simple, affectionate, normal correspondence from a teenage son to his deployed father. I checked the date. 15 years ago, long before the fraud began. Long before whatever shift had occurred in his thinking. I set the letter aside and continued through the box. More letters, more normal family documents. At the bottom, I found something else. A financial planning worksheet in Elena's handwriting, dated 3 years ago. Retirement goals, $500,000 saved by Drik's retirement. Current total, $287,000, on track. Lucas graduates college next year, will be financially independent. House paid off in 8 years. We can finally travel. See the places we've always talked about. She'd been planning, dreaming, building toward a future that would never happen. And somewhere along the way, Lucas had decided that money belonged to him instead. I closed the box and returned it to the shelf. Then I went inside and showered. The hot water helped clear my mind. Tomorrow evening would be the culmination of everything. The evidence, the procedures, the public accounting. That evening I received a detailed email from Marlowe. The institutional response was nearly complete. Bank accounts had been flagged for investigation. Legal holds were being placed on transferred funds. The credit lines opened in my name had been reported as fraudulent. 3 financial institutions had already begun internal reviews. The email included specific details about who would be at tomorrow's gathering. 2 representatives from First National Bank will attend. They've been notified to expect questions. The district attorney's office has assigned a financial crimes investigator who will observe. Our legal consultant will document everything. The church administrator has been briefed on the possibility of unexpected announcements, but doesn't know the details. Whitmore added his own assessment in a separate message. Legal grounds are solid. Multiple felony counts if prosecuted fully. Your son's attorney will recommend a plea arrangement the moment they see the evidence. This won't go to trial. The documentation is too strong, the timeline is too clear. He continued, "One thing to consider. Lucas will likely attempt to contact you before tomorrow. He may sense something is wrong. The banks have begun inquiries. He'll know he's being investigated. Don't engage. Any conversation could complicate the legal proceedings. Let him wonder. Let him worry. It won't change the outcome." I read both messages twice, then deleted them as instructed. The information was clear. The plan was sound. Now it was just a matter of execution. I made dinner mechanically. Simple food, nothing that required thought. Grilled chicken and rice, Elena's basic weeknight meal. I ate at the kitchen table in silence, then cleaned the dishes and put everything away. Elena had taught me that. Keep things organized, maintain order even when nothing makes sense. My phone buzzed at 9 o'clock. A text from Lucas. "Reception tomorrow at 6, Church Hall. Hope you can make it." I studied the message, the casual phrasing, the assumption that I'd attend like any normal family member at any normal gathering. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, no sense that his world was about to collapse. I replied, "I'll be there." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. No questions about my flight, no mention of the memorial service, no acknowledgement that he'd avoided me completely for the past week. Just a thumbs-up emoji. Another message arrived 10 minutes later. "Good. We should talk afterward. About Mom's estate and next steps." Next steps. He was still thinking about access, about control, about continuing whatever plan he'd been executing. I didn't respond. A final message came through. "Dad, you there?" I set my phone face down on the table and looked around the empty kitchen. Elena had managed this house alone for so long. She'd built a life here while I was deployed. She'd created routines, maintained relationships, kept everything functioning. And in her final weeks, she'd discovered that the son she'd raised had been stealing from us both. The weight of that knowledge must have been crushing, but she'd documented it anyway. She'd organized the evidence. She'd asked Father Hale to ensure I learned the truth. Even in her final days, she'd been thinking clearly, planning, making sure I'd have what I needed. I owed her this. Not revenge, correction, making sure the truth had consequences, making sure Lucas understood that distance and duty didn't mean absence of accountability. I went upstairs and laid out my dress uniform for tomorrow, pressed and ready, service ribbons aligned, every detail correct. It wasn't about intimidation. It was about reminder. I'd served for 27 years. I'd earned the authority I carried. And tomorrow, that authority would be visible. The uniform represented something Lucas had never quite understood. Discipline, responsibility, accountability. He'd grown up with a father who was often absent but always accountable. Every action documented, every decision reviewed, every responsibility met. And somehow, he'd convinced himself that those same standards didn't apply to him. I set my alarm for 0600 and lay down. Sleep came easily. I'd trained myself long ago to rest before important operations. Tomorrow was just another mission, different terrain, different objective, same principles, clarity, precision, execution. In the darkness, I thought about Elena one last time, about the life she'd lived here while I was deployed, about the discovery that must have broken something inside her, about the strength it took to document everything rather than confront it immediately. She'd given me a gift, not just the evidence, but the choice of how to use it. She could have exposed Lucas herself, could have called me immediately, could have handled it a dozen different ways. But she'd waited. She'd organized. She'd ensured I'd learn the truth at the right moment, in the right way, with all the tools I'd need to respond appropriately. Tomorrow, I'd honor that gift. Tomorrow, the accounting would begin. The church hall was decorated with simple white tablecloths and small flower arrangements. 40 or 50 people moved through the space, holding plates and glasses. Conversations hummed quietly. Someone had set up a table with photographs of Elena. People gathered around it, pointing and sharing memories. I arrived at 6:15. I wore my uniform, not the combat version, the dress uniform, pressed, clean, service ribbons aligned perfectly. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Lucas stood near the refreshment table, talking to two older men in suits. He glanced up when I entered. His expression tightened slightly, but he recovered quickly and raised his hand in greeting. I nodded and moved toward the far side of the room. The space felt different from the memorial service. Less formal, more casual. People had relaxed. They were sharing stories now, laughing at old memories. Elena's photograph smiled from the display table. She looked happy in that picture, younger than she'd been at the end. Father Hale approached me first. "Mr. Fallon, I'm glad you could attend. Thank you for organizing this. It's important for the community to gather," he said. "Elena would have appreciated it." "She would?" He studied my uniform briefly, not with suspicion, with understanding. He knew what it meant. He'd been a military chaplain before joining civilian ministry. He recognized the statement being made. "You're still in service?" he asked. "I am." "When do you return?" "That depends on several factors." He nodded slowly, then excused himself to greet other guests. I stood near the wall and observed. The room had divided itself naturally. Lucas's circle near the refreshments. Elena's church friends near the photograph table. A few people I didn't recognize scattered throughout. Lucas moved through the room easily. He shook hands. He smiled. He accepted condolences with practiced grace. People seemed to like him. He'd built relationships here, just as Elena had. He'd positioned himself as the grieving son, the devoted family member managing everything while his father was away. I watched a woman approach him with what looked like a casserole dish. She said something that made him laugh. He touched her shoulder gratefully. She patted his arm and moved away, smiling. He was good at this. The performance. The facade. At 6:30, I noticed two men in business suits enter through the side door. One wore gray, the other navy. They didn't get food, they didn't socialize. They positioned themselves near the back wall and observed. Financial representatives. Marlowe had said they'd be here. At 6:45, Marlowe Ellery entered. He wore a dark suit and carried a slim briefcase. He spotted me immediately and walked over. "Everything's in place," he said quietly. "Whitmore confirmed final authorizations an hour ago. Legal notifications were delivered to the relevant institutions at 5 o'clock. It's done. Who else is here?" Two representatives from the financial management firm. They're near the back table, gray suit and navy blazer. Both received preliminary notifications this afternoon. They know something's happening, but not the full scope yet. "And the witness?" "Civilian legal consultant. She's positioned near the door. Navy dress. She'll confirm procedural compliance if anyone questions authority or timeline." I glanced toward the entrance. A woman in her 40s stood near the doorway holding a small notebook. She wasn't eating or socializing, just observing. Professional. Prepared. Marlowe shifted his briefcase slightly. "Inside here are copies of every key document. Transaction records, signature comparisons, timeline verifications. If anyone demands proof, I can provide it immediately." "Will that be necessary?" "Probably not, but preparation prevents complications." He moved away to position himself near the legal consultant. I remained where I was, watching the room. Lucas was laughing now. Someone had told a story. He looked relaxed, confident. He had no idea that everything had already been decided. I checked my watch. 6:50. Father Hale was speaking with an elderly woman near the entrance. The financial representatives remained against the back wall. The legal consultant made a note in her book. Everyone was in position. At 6:55, I stepped away from the wall and walked toward the center of the room. Conversations continued around me. Someone mentioned Elena's volunteer work. Someone else laughed about a story from years ago. Normal gathering sounds. I stopped near the photograph table and turned to face the gathering. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gesture for attention. I simply stood and waited. People nearby noticed first. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Within 15 seconds, the room had gone quiet. Lucas looked up sharply from across the space. His smile faded. "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Military projection. Trained delivery. "I'd like to say a few words." Father Hale started to move toward me, then stopped. He recognized this wasn't a request for permission. "Thank you all for honoring Elena's memory," I said. "She valued this community deeply. She invested her time and energy here while I was deployed. I'm grateful for the relationships she built." People nodded. A few murmured agreement. Lucas remained frozen near the refreshment table. "There's something else that needs to be addressed," I continued. "It concerns decisions made during my absence, specifically financial and legal matters involving my family." The room went completely silent. Someone set down a glass. The sound echoed. "Over the past 2 years, while I was serving overseas, several transactions were executed in my name," I said. "Withdrawals from joint accounts, property transfer documents, power of attorney authorizations. These actions totaled over $240,000. Lucas's face had gone pale. One of the men in suits shifted his weight uncomfortably. "I did not authorize these transactions," I said. "I was not present to sign the documents. During the dates in question, I was confirmed on active deployment 7,000 miles from any institution that processed these authorizations. The signatures were forged. The authority was fabricated." Lucas stepped forward. "Dad, this isn't the time." "Be quiet," I said, not shouted, just clear. He stopped. "As of this afternoon, all relevant institutions have been notified," I continued. "Accounts have been frozen. Fraudulent transfers have been reversed. Credit lines opened in my name have been reported and closed. Legal proceedings have been initiated through proper channels. The appropriate authorities are now involved." One of the men in suits moved toward the door. Marlowe Ellery stepped into his path smoothly. The man stopped. "This wasn't a family dispute," I said. "This was systematic fraud executed while I was deployed in service of this country. It was discovered by my wife shortly before she passed. She documented what she found. She organized the evidence. She ensured I would learn the truth after the memorial service." I looked directly at Lucas. His hands were shaking. Sweat had formed on his forehead. "The institutional response is already complete," I said. "There's nothing to negotiate. No appeals to make. The decisions have been executed through proper legal channels with full documentation and verified timelines. This gathering is simply notification." Father Hale stepped forward carefully. "Mr. Fallon, perhaps this conversation should happen privately." "No," I said. "These actions were taken while I was absent. They were hidden behind my service and my distance. They were enabled by assumptions about my availability and authority. The response should be equally visible." I turned back to the room. Several people had pulled out phones. Others stared in shocked silence. Elena's photograph watched from the table beside me. "For those who were unaware of these circumstances, I apologize for the disruption to this gathering," I said. "For those who participated in or enabled these transactions, you've already received legal notification. For anyone who wants to verify the information I've presented, representatives from the military legal office and the financial institutions involved are present in this room." I gestured toward Marlowe, the legal consultant, and the 2 financial representatives. All 4 stood silently, confirming their presence without speaking. Lucas's hands were shaking visibly now. He looked around the room as if searching for support. Nobody moved toward him. The woman who'd brought the casserole earlier had stepped back. The people who'd been laughing with him minutes ago avoided his gaze. "The legal proceedings will continue through appropriate channels," I said. "Documentation has been filed with district authorities. Financial institutions have initiated fraud investigations. Military legal advisory has confirmed all procedural compliance." I paused, making sure everyone understood. "My son will have the opportunity to respond through his legal representation, but the facts are not in dispute. The evidence is comprehensive. The timeline is verified." Lucas tried to speak. "You don't understand?" "I understand completely," I said. "You exploited my absence. You forged my authorization. You stole from your mother and from me. You assumed distance meant ignorance. You were wrong." The room was absolutely silent now. Even the sounds from outside, traffic, wind, seemed to have stopped. "That's all I needed to say," I concluded. "Thank you for your time." I walked toward the door. The crowd parted. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved to stop me. Behind me, I heard Lucas say something, but his voice was too quiet to understand. I didn't turn around. Marlowe fell into step beside me as I exited into the hallway. The legal consultant followed at a discreet distance. "Clean execution?" Marlowe said quietly. "No room for counter-narrative. No opportunity for emotional manipulation." Was it enough? More than enough. The institutional mechanisms are already in motion. He can't undo what's been finalized. All he can do now is respond to legal proceedings that are already underway. We reached the parking lot. The evening air was cool. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm chirped. "What happens next?" I asked. "For him? His attorney will contact him within the hour once word spreads. They'll review the charges. They'll see the evidence. They'll recommend a plea arrangement because fighting this would only increase his exposure." Marlowe paused. "For you? You return to duty when you're ready. Everything here is handled." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for your help." "Elena deserves someone to see this through properly," he said. "You did that. You honored her final wishes. You maintained discipline throughout. That matters." He walked to his car. The legal consultant nodded to me briefly, then headed to her own vehicle. I stood in the parking lot for another moment, looking back at the church hall. Through the windows, I could see people beginning to move again, conversations resuming, the gathering continuing without me, but the tone had changed. I could see it in their body language, the way they glanced toward Lucas, the way they maintained distance. The truth had been delivered. The consequences were in motion. I removed my uniform jacket and folded it carefully over my arm. The ribbons caught the streetlight briefly. 27 years of service represented in colored bars and small medals. Authority earned through time and discipline. Then I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away. I returned to the house and sat in the dark living room. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere distant. A car passed. Normal evening sounds. I didn't turn on any lights. The room felt different now, emptier somehow, though nothing had physically changed. Elena's books still lined the shelves. Her reading chair sat in the corner. The curtains she'd chosen hung at the windows. But the presence I'd felt when I first arrived, the sense that she'd just stepped out and would return, that was gone now. I'd completed what she'd asked. The truth had been delivered. The consequences had been set in motion. Her final wish had been fulfilled. My phone rang twice within the first hour. Both times it was Lucas. I watched the screen light up, watched his name appear, watched the call go to voicemail. He left no messages. After the second call, the phone went silent. At midnight, Whitmore sent a text. "District attorney reviewing case tomorrow, charges likely, multiple counts. Stay available if they need testimony." I replied, "Understood." Another text arrived minutes later. "You handled that well, controlled, professional. Elena would have approved." I didn't respond to that one. I wasn't sure Elena would have approved of the public nature of the revelation, but she'd left me the choice of how to proceed. She'd documented the evidence and trusted me to decide the method. This was the method I'd chosen. The house felt emptier now than it had 3 days ago. When I'd first arrived, Elena's presence had lingered everywhere. The smell of her tea, the way she organized books, the jacket still hanging by the door, the prescription bottle on the bathroom counter, small details that suggested she might walk in at any moment. Now those details felt like remnants, evidence of a life that had ended. The space was becoming just a house again, walls and furniture and empty rooms. I spent the next day organizing Elena's belongings systematically. I started in the bedroom. I boxed up her clothes and labeled them for donation, dresses she'd worn to church, sweaters she'd favored in winter, the jacket by the door that still smelled faintly like her perfume. Everything folded carefully and packed away. I sorted through her papers next. Medical records that no longer mattered, insurance documents that needed to be filed, receipts and warranties and instruction manuals. I separated items that required official handling from items that could simply be discarded. In the bottom drawer of her desk, I found a journal. The pages were filled with her handwriting. I opened it to a random entry from 8 months ago. "Drik has been deployed for 4 months now. Lucas called today asking about the joint account passwords. Said he needed to handle some bills for me. I gave him the information. He's always been helpful that way." I turned to another entry, 3 months later. "Noticed a withdrawal I don't remember making. Asked Lucas about it. He said it was for the roof repair, but I thought we'd already paid that bill. Maybe I'm forgetting things." Another entry, 2 months before she passed. "Found papers in Lucas's old room, documents with Drik's signature, but Drik hasn't been home in almost a year. How could he have signed anything? I need to look into this more carefully." The final entry was dated 1 week before her passing. I was wrong to wait. I should have called Drik immediately, but I wanted to be sure. I wanted to have all the evidence organized. I didn't want to accuse Lucas of something this terrible without being absolutely certain. Now I am certain, and I'm running out of time. I've asked Father Hale to help. If something happens to me, Drik needs to know everything. I closed the journal and sat holding it for several minutes. She'd known. She'd documented her suspicions as they formed. She'd watched her own son betray us both, and she'd carried that knowledge alone until the very end. I placed the journal in a box marked estate documents. Then I continued clearing the room. The priest called in the afternoon. "Mr. Fallon, I wanted to check how you're managing." "I'm fine. Last night was difficult for everyone." "It was necessary?" "Yes," he said carefully. "I believe Elena would have wanted the truth addressed, but the manner was quite public. The community is struggling to process what they learned." "The manner was appropriate for the circumstances," I said. "Private conversations wouldn't have provided the necessary accountability. Lucas built his position here on a false foundation. That foundation needed to be publicly dismantled." Father Hale was quiet for a moment. "I understand your reasoning, and I won't judge your decision. But Lucas is part of this community too. People are having to reconsider their relationships with him. That's causing pain." "He caused that pain when he committed fraud. I simply revealed it." "Yes, you're right." He sighed. "Will you be attending services while you're here?" "I don't plan to." "I see. Well, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Elena was important to us, and regardless of what's happened, you're still part of her legacy." "Thank you." He disconnected. I set the phone down and continued packing boxes. By evening, I'd cleared most of Elena's personal items from the bedroom. The house looked cleaner, but emptier. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and reviewed my deployment orders. I was scheduled to return in 5 days unless circumstances required an extension. I could request an extension. There were estate matters that needed attention, legal proceedings that might require my presence, but staying here meant remaining in this empty house, meant walking past Elena's chair and her bookshelf and all the spaces she'd occupied. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Please." I recognized Lucas's phrasing. He must have been using someone else's phone. I deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived 10 minutes later. "I can explain everything. It wasn't how it looked. There were reasons, things you don't understand." I blocked the number. A third message came through from yet another unknown number 20 minutes later. "Dad, please, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I powered off the phone completely. The silence that followed was absolute. The house, the street outside, even my own breathing seemed muted. I sat in that silence for over an hour, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. Elena had discovered the truth and chosen to document it rather than confront it immediately. She'd organized the evidence carefully. She'd ensured I would receive it after the memorial. She'd trusted me to handle it correctly. I had handled it correctly. The response was proportional. The method was appropriate. The outcome was just.